Hey guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. I've just got a little project on the go, and whilst this one isn't going to be particularly interesting as far as innovative ideas and amazing adaptation of secondhand materials, it is just a demonstration that you keep enough stuff lying around and those things that might be handy one day actually will be. I was recently given these 3 plastic barrels. Actually I had one and a guy dropped off another 2 with some e-waste he dropped off. He didn't want them anymore, couldn't be bothered selling them, and I said, well, beauty, they'll be really handy for storing some e-waste scrap or some anything that I want to store up and keep out of the weather. I'm doing a lot of scrapping of all sorts of stuff, and I do need to store it, so good waterproof storage there. The problem is that these lids, whilst they're actually airtight, well, they're watertight anyway, they do fill up with water on top when it rains, and being under this tree here in my shady spot of the yard, they will get all these dead leaves and twigs, and this particular tree I've got above me here drops a lot of seed pods certain times of the year. So I don't want this to fill with water and become a sludge. It can also breed mosquitoes, and it can get a bit smelly too. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some recycled materials, or materials that I will recycle, that I've saved from various things. There's a bed end there, and these hardwood rails are off an old bed as well. And there was a single sheet of polycarbonate sheeting. I used to know it as Elsinite. I think Laserlight is another brand name, but it's basically just clear roofing. And that was just an odd sheet that I found in a shed when I was cleaning up one day. So using these materials and some tech screws and some larger ones. Now I've acquired these all from shed cleanouts, and a couple of big old hinges. They don't actually match, but they're around about the same size. And I'm going to make a little lid that sits over those barrels, hinges off the fence, and it'll just be a great way to keep the water from gathering on the lids of those barrels. And as I said, it's not a astoundingly amazing project I've come up with. It's just basically using materials to do a little job, and I like to film these things because it shows you, a lot of my subscribers as well are just into zero waste and reusing products. They're not necessarily carpenters or people that have a lot of skill set in building. So I like to show these little jobs, and hopefully it inspires people to do their own. So the first thing you need to do is put a couple of these 2 rails here up against the fence. They'll screw to the rails of the fence. The fence isn't in the best condition, but it'll be strong enough to screw these 2, and that'll give us an anchor point to put the hinges on. As with a lot of my jobs, I like to be able to do it without owning a full workshop full of equipment. I'm not going to worry about a spirit level. We've just sided that up along the panels of the fence. There's no point really in putting a spirit level on that piece and deciding that level is there because the fence is out, and then it's going to look shocking. So we won't worry if it's actually level or not. We'll just have it in line with the fence, and that will look much better. So all we need to do, we don't need a tape measure either. We'll just stand this up here, mark a couple of spots where we need to put some screws. I'll do the same at the bottom, and then we'll drill it out to suit the screws. Now I've found a drill bit that is actually slightly wider than the thread of the tech screw, and that way we can drill through the wood, and our tech screw will then push straight through onto the fence railing, and it won't bind up in here. If our hole wasn't big enough, it would thread into the pole and then thread into the rail, and we could end up with a gap. Whereas this way it would actually pull right down, and it'll pull the timber hard onto the rail. So we'll drill a couple of holes here, we'll drill all the other spots, and then we can put the rails up against the fence. Now this drill bit's fairly blunt, and the wood's hardwood as you can see, so it's taking a bit to push through. Just a tip when you are drilling wood for anyone that hasn't had experience, push down until it drills a bit of a hole, and then pause and bring it up and just clear the wood out of the flutes, and it'll just help it drill in a bit deeper. It's not so much of an issue with a nice sharp drill bit, but when you're using a blunt one, it does help get through it. If you kept drilling with it all clogged up, it would actually start to smoke after a while. So I really need to use the sharp drill bit. This is just one I found in a box of junk, but it was the right size. And I usually just tap the bits out like that. So that's got all the holes done, and you can see the Tek screws will slip through, and that will allow them to pull into the rail nicely. So let's screw them to the fence. That's going to be perfect. We'll put the rest of these screws in, and then we can organise our hinges. So I've just set the lid, which was actually the bed head. I've just set that on top of the barrels. I don't need it to be supported by any poles, and it's fine sitting on the top of the barrels. They're all the same height. And I've just propped the hinges up against the rails there where I'm going to screw them. And I've left them out a little bit from, as in the end of this rail, I've left a bit of a gap, so that there's still enough room to get the screws in for the hinge, but it just means that when it folds up, it'll have a little bit of room. Remembering we've also got that polycarbonate roofing going over here, which I might stop a little bit before the end, otherwise it's going to kind of sandwich as we fold the lid up. I'm not looking for the lid to be right up hard against the fence. It doesn't matter if it's on a little bit of an angle, and I can just easily hook a little chain off the top rail to an eyelet in the middle here just to hold it up when I'm moving the barrels. It'll still allow me plenty of access through to that little laneway there, and it should work fine. Now, sitting on the barrels, I'll prop the back up a little bit just to give the whole lid a little bit of an angle forward, and that way any water that does, when we get any rain, any water, and that should flow off the front. I could equally angle it backwards, it really doesn't make much difference. And I could, if I wanted to get more involved, I could have a couple of pivot timber sticks that pivot on the side, and they could actually act as legs if I wanted to have the thing actually not resting on the barrels. But it's a bit tight each end, I'm not going to worry about that. So there we go, that's what we're up to. I'm just going to put some screws into these hinges and we'll see how it looks, and then we'll need to put the cladding on top. So we've screwed the base of the hinge in successfully. I'm just using some random old plaster screws and wood screws that I've found in shed lots again. I do really dislike paying retail price for hardware when I can get it for free. So now I'll just straighten the hinge up a little bit. They're a little bit worn in the pins, these old hinges. They're very old. This one's probably 100 years old, this hinge. And the one on the other side has certainly got some vintage to it as well, and it's been a little bit bent in the hinge. But that's not a problem, it'll certainly work fine for this use. So I'll put some screws in here, or straighten it up a little bit as I do it, and we'll see how the lid lifts up. So that's secure, and it hinges up beautifully, and it actually sits flat against the fence at the moment, but it won't do that when the cladding's on. But we'll leave the cladding away from the back a little bit because we don't need it all the way to the back. As long as it covers the tops of the barrels, that's all I need. And this could be used as a shelf for crates of other stuff. The only thing I have to be aware of, if I load it up with too much stuff and I need to get to the barrel, it's going to be a problem. So I'm not planning to use it for a shelf, but perhaps when the barrels become full and I'm waiting to take a load down to Melbourne, look, they might be insulated wire, or I might put extruded aluminium heat sinks in there, whatever. Once they're full and they're just waiting, then I could probably certainly use the top part as a shelf. All we need to do is now cut some cladding and screw that on, and the job is finished. There we go, all done in under an hour with absolutely zero cost. I've made use of a little spot in my yard for storage, using some drums for free, materials for free, a little bit of my time, and I've just Tek screwed that cladding on the top there with some roofing screws. It won't leak any water. I've also put a little eye hook in here so that when we lift it up, and it lifts up beautifully, I have a chain at the back that I can hook on there and it will hold it up. Now, as I said, I don't need it to go right back to the fence. I'll just put this hook on. There we go, beautifully. That's really good access for the barrels. It keeps it out of the road. I could shorten the chain if I wanted to go higher. It doesn't impede traffic down that side lane. Not that I go down there much. I've got a bit of junk to get out of there. Really good now use for a spot for my barrels. They won't get wet on top. They won't breed mosquitoes. They won't get messy. And you may notice that that lid just slopes slightly to the right. And I decided to put the cladding running that way so the water will actually drip off that end, and it might even go onto some of the pot plants down below. So there, very happy with that. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I've inspired you to make use of some materials. It's not only good for your hip pocket because it didn't cost me a single cent, but you know, it's stopping stuff going to landfill. It's giving things another use, and this will serve me well for quite a long time, just to provide some waterproof area for those barrels. And you don't need to have particularly good carpentry skills or building skills. It was a really easy job to do. These are the only tools I used. I probably could have got away without even using the wood saw because the rails were almost the right height anyway. A drill with a little hex drive for the tech screws and the Phillips head drive. A pair of scissors was okay for cutting the polycarbonate sheet, and the only reason I used the pliers was just to squash the end links on the chain so that they became a hook, and second-hand screws. So thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.